Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. We have got a lot to talk about here as we approach the 2020 NHL Entry Draft, as well as the start of free agency. For those who don't know, the NHL Draft will be taking place virtually this year due to, of course, concerns surrounding the coronavirus pandemic. But it will happen virtually beginning with round 1 on Tuesday, October 6th. That starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, and then rounds 2 through 7 will take place on Wednesday, October 7th, beginning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Time. So your Washington Capitals, barring any trades, of course, will have the 24th overall selection in round number 1, as well as selections in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds. This year's draft class is considered to be very deep, particularly through the first round. So I am quite pleased that the Caps had chosen to hold on to their first round pick. It should hopefully pay dividends for them in the form of an NHL caliber player. And particularly, there is projected to be a number of very good forwards still available at that number 24 slot. So we'll see what happens and who they decide to take with that pick. For what it's worth, even though, draft days can be crazy and a lot of trades are often flying in the hours leading up to and during the draft itself, but I do not foresee the Caps trading away that first round pick this year. I think that they are going to make a selection there, so we'll see if I'm right. But like I said, it's a very, very deep draft this year, particularly through the first round. So hoping that I'm right and that they'll hold on to it. And Caps assistant general manager and resident scouting wizard, Ross Mahoney, has said that the Caps drafting strategy will be the same as it always is, which is that they will take the best player available regardless of position. So it's a strategy that has obviously worked really, really well for them over the last 15 years or so, as they have probably been the best drafting team in the entire NHL over that time span. So they definitely know what they're doing. And I do think that they are going to take a forward in the first round this year, though. Not just because they need another high-end forward prospect. Obviously, last year they took stud forward Connor McMichael in the first round, and then added forwards Brett Leeson and Alexei Protas in the second and third rounds, respectively. But also because there's expected to be quite a few stud forward prospects still available at that number 24 slot in the first round this year. So I would say there's a very good chance that the best player available will, in fact, be a forward. So, like I said, we'll see what happens, but I would put good money on the fact that the Caps will be drafting a forward in the first round. Anyhow, just because I don't think that the Caps will trade away their first round pick this year doesn't mean that I think they're going to be totally quiet on these draft days. Caps general manager Brian McClellan, he of course likes to be active at the draft almost every year. He likes to make trades at the draft. Usually one every year, almost like clockwork. And I think that this year will be no different. It is a good time, the draft, for general managers around the league to get things done for their rosters, and Brian McClellan in particular has been very efficient at it. What I do think they're going to do is they're going to make a trade to free up some salary cap space to give them just some more flexibility with their signings and with their roster. And that'll all tie into what I think they're going to do in free agency, because there's a few things that I do think they're going to do. But it all starts with salary cap space. You have to have that. The more, the better. And Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet, he's reported that the Caps might be looking to move Richard Panik and his $2.75 million cap hit in particular. So that would be a smart move, if you ask me, as Panik was originally penciled in as the replacement for Brett Connolly on the Caps' third line. But it just hasn't worked out that way. Panik, he struggled mightily right from the beginning of his Capitals tenure. Then, of course, he got injured. And then when he came back, he did start playing a lot better. I'll give him that. And, I like the guy. But he was, playing better largely on the Caps' fourth line. And you simply don't want to be paying a fourth liner $2.75 million a year against your salary cap. That hurts you in a salary cap world, even during normal times, but especially now with the global pandemic and with the salary cap remaining flat at $81.5 million for the foreseeable future. So it'd be ideal if the Caps could move him, and I do think that Brenden McLellan will be able to get it done. It's not as if Panik is a bad player either. He's a decent player, and he would probably be worth his contract on a lot of different teams. It's just that the Caps have so much forward depth. He's not good enough to be playing on their third line, and so if he's only going to be playing on your fourth line, then at that point, of course, he isn't worth his contract. So he needs to be playing on a team with less forward depth and where he makes sense as a third line player in order to be worth his salary cap hit. And that, of course, would also free up some space for the Caps to have a better player on their third line. They also do, of course, have Carl Haglin, who has an identical cap hit to that of Richard Panik, and who is, frankly, an even better option to have in the lineup because he brings even more speed. The Caps like to play a fast game, and probably even faster under Peter Laviolette now. And Haglin as well, he's one of the best penalty killers in the league, obviously. So he's also, of course, got an abundance of Stanley Cup winning experience. So when you have a guy who's a proven playoff performer and a Stanley Cup winner, not once but twice, and he's one of the best penalty killers in the world, then you want to have that guy in your lineup over a Richard Panik. Fun fact about Carl Haglin as well. Did you know that he actually played the most playoff games of any player in the NHL through the 2010s decade? He played in 128 NHL postseason games in the 2010s. Just crazy. So, you could say he's got a lot of playoff experience. So anyways, I do think that we could see a trade of Richard Panik, go down at some point here, if not at the draft, then probably sometime before the free agency period opens on October 9th. And even if they aren't able to get it done before then, I do think Brenden McLellan will keep working on it and he will be able to get it done. And speaking of the free agency period opening soon, there's at least a couple of things that I think the Caps are going to do. And why don't we start in-house? As I think their number one priority right now is that they want to re-sign defenseman Brenden Dillon. And that interest in re-signing is mutual, by the way, as Dillon himself has also said multiple times that he really does want to stay with the Washington Capitals. So I think that's priority number one, and I do think they'll get it done. Sportsnet is projecting that he will be re-signed to a multi-year deal by the Caps, somewhere between the $3.5 to $4 million per year range. And frankly, for what he brings, I think that would be a steal. But I think that, he is willing to give the Caps that little bit of a discount versus what he could get on the open market, because he does really want to stay here. He's consistently raved about his time in Washington with the Caps ever since he was traded here back in February. He loves the organization, he loves the city, he loves the team, he loves his teammates, he loves the skill level and the intensity and the drive to win. And he loves the way that the team plays the game as well. And he loves the tight-knit family atmosphere and how much fun this team has on and off the ice together, playing the game that they all love, being at the rink with one another. So I do think he's willing to give the Caps a little bit of a discount because he truly wants to stay and to be here for the long term. And Elliot Friedman has reported that is the main reason why the Caps are looking to move out some money, is so that they can re-sign Brenden Dillon and still maintain some flexibility with other parts of their roster. They could re-sign Dillon even without moving out a player, but if they can even just move out that Richard Panik contract, then they can re-sign Dillon and still have quite a good chunk of salary cap space to play around with. So it'll be interesting. But the other thing that I think that the Caps are going to do, and you heard it here first, as I've been saying it ever since reports first surfaced months ago, that the New York Rangers were maybe going to buy out the remainder of Henrik Lundqvist's contract. I do think that the Caps are going to sign him. I think it makes a ton of sense for both sides. I think from From Lundqvist's perspective, the Caps are a team that he knows very well. It's a longtime rival for whom he has a ton of respect, and that goes both ways, by the way, as the Caps have a ton of respect for Lundqvist as well. But Hank, he played against these Caps in the same division for a long time. They've had a lot of battles, a lot of playoff matchups against one another. He knows how competitive they are. He knows how tough they are to beat. He's been trying to stop Alexeyev for basically his entire career. So I think for Lundqvist, it makes a lot of sense because you'd be going to a Stanley Cup contending team that has a very good chance of winning it all pretty much every single year. And obviously, he wants to win a Stanley Cup. So it'd be a great opportunity for him, having still not won the Cup and coming now to the twilight years of his illustrious career. And let's be honest, he deserves to win one, right? Like, he deserves to win the Stanley Cup at least once. And from the Caps' perspective, you have this outstanding rookie netminder in Ilya Samsonov, who did get some Calder Trophy votes this past season, by the way. And he's the goalie of our future. And so who better to mentor your goalie of the future than the great Henrik Lundqvist. Lundqvist, of course, is a legend. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. And he's also a class act who has absolutely no problems mentoring the young guys. And pretty much every young goalie looks up to him, idolizes him as well, right? Like, you'd have to be crazy not to. And so those are just the benefits of having him in the locker room. On the ice, Lundqvist would be a great security blanket, if you will, to have in your back pocket, just in case, you get to the postseason and all of a sudden you have the youngster Samsonov feeling a little bit of the jitters, getting his first taste of NHL playoff hockey. Having Lundqvist would be like having a great insurance policy, just in case anything goes wrong with Samsonov. Not saying that it would, but just in case, as it would be, the next postseason in the NHL that Samsonov plays in, it'll be his first, right? So you kind of want to have that insurance policy. And I mean, in Lundqvist's case, his career postseason numbers speak for themselves, obviously. He's one of the greatest goalies of all time when the heat is on, when the spotlight's shining the brightest. So I just think it makes a ton of sense for both sides. And like I said, you heard it here first. It's going to happen. Aside from that, as far as the Caps roster, looking at the roster, that the top six forwards are totally set, as is the third line center position, which is obviously filled by the Tiger, Sir Lars Eller. That was one of those draft day deals, by the way, that Brian McClellan made a few years ago. He got that one done at the draft, so that's a good example of that. But I do believe that the fourth line center position is set as well, with Nick Dowd obviously there. He's been nothing short of phenomenal for this team, and Garnet Hathaway is obviously a mainstay on that fourth line as well. I absolutely love Hathaway. He's become one of my favorite players. The dude is such an agitator, and he always wears his heart on his sleeve. I love it. So Dowd and Hathaway, are not only their best buddies off the ice, obviously hosting the Capitals podcast together as well. So they're best buds, but that fourth line was also one of the very best fourth lines in the entire NHL all season long, no matter who was playing on their other wing. Whoever was playing with them, those two guys made whoever that third player was on their line at the time a whole lot better. So it's almost like Dowd and Hathaway just have so much chemistry amongst the two of them that it doesn't even matter who they play with. That chemistry will just rub off on that third guy by proxy. And suddenly whoever the third guy is looks like a stud too. So, there's just simply no way that you split up Dowd and Hathaway. They're literally perfect in their roles. But so I do think that where you could see some movement in the forward group is at the third line wing positions, and at the other fourth line wing slot, which is not occupied by Hathaway. And I think that you're going to see some more youth, for sure, being injected into this Capitals lineup, just like they did in 2018, right before winning the Stanley Cup. So obviously, Connor McMichael is a guy who jumps out at you right away, whom a lot of Caps fans are itching to see in the lineup. I think Daniel Sprong as well is going to get a real good opportunity here in this upcoming season to carve out a spot for himself here. He's a really good player. He's competitive, and he's got really good offensive instincts. He actually spent some time on Sidney Crosby's wing when he was in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, so that should tell you something, right? And he's still just 23 years old as well, so there's a lot of as yet untapped potential there. And then there's even a guy like Beck Mallenstein as well, who has widely been described as the Hershey Bears version of Tom Wilson. You can never have too many of those guys. And for what it's worth, I certainly don't think that the youth movement is just going to be limited to the forwards. I think that there's going to be some youth being injected into the defense corps as well. And frankly, this defense corps could use a bit of a shakeup anyway. I don't think anyone around here is going to argue with that, right? And so I think that you are going to see Martin Fehérváry getting significant NHL playing time, and I think he's ready for it for sure. He's looked great every time that the Caps have called him up. He plays with a confidence that is well beyond his 20 years of age. Fehérváry, of course, made his NHL debut this past season at just 19 years of age. And he was actually the first player who was not selected in the first round of the NHL Entry Draft to make his NHL debut before his 20th birthday, since Samuel Girard did it on October 10th of 2017. And obviously, Samuel Girard has turned out to be a hell of a player for the Colorado Avalanche, so we can hope the same thing for Martin Fehérváry. And obviously, probably the Caps defense prospect with the highest ceiling would be the 6'4", 210-pound behemoth, Alexeyev, who the Caps took in the first round of the 2018 draft. The 20-year-old is good on offense and on defense, and he's obviously a huge presence out there on the ice, both with his physicality and with his booming slap shots. He's also known to be a great personality and a great teammate off of the ice as well. Just a real character kid, a high-quality person. So I do think that you'll see him in the Caps lineup sooner rather than later as well. And he is projected to eventually be a top-pairing NHL defenseman. So, anytime that a guy is projected to eventually be a top pairing defenseman at the NHL level, you're probably going to be seeing that guy playing in the NHL sooner rather than later. So there you have it, Caps fans. A few things to watch for as we head into the draft, as we head into free agency, and as we eventually head into next season, whenever that's going to happen. So to sum up, I think that the Caps are going to trade at least one roster player to free up salary cap space, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a draft day deal the way that Brian McClellan has liked to do in the past. I think that they're going to re-sign Brenden Dillon, and I think that they are going to sign Henrik Lundqvist. And I do think that you're going to see some movement amongst the bottom six forwards and the defense corps for the Caps. And you're going to see some youth being injected into the lineup for next season. So all in all, it should be a very exciting week. A week or so ahead here, not just with the Washington Capitals, but with every team around the league. It's going to be utter craziness. The NHL is having to pack so much into such a short period of time here due to this global pandemic. It's going to be absolute mayhem, pretty much, but it's going to be great for us fans. It makes for great TV, so grab your popcorn, settle in, and get ready for a wild ride, babes. It's going to be a hell of a week. Anyways, that's all we've got for you today, Caps fans. Thank you all so much again for tuning in today and for listening to our musings leading up to the NHL draft, leading up to free agency as we speed full force into this offseason here. And hey, by the way, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't done so already. I know many of you have, but it's just a little button that says subscribe. Just give it a little clickety-click there. We are available, as you know, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Podcast Addict. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you would desire to get your podcasts from, we are on there. So subscribe. Share us with your friends and your family and your fellow Caps fans and your fellow hockey fans in general. No Penguins fans, though. We don't want them on here. Let's buckle up together because, like I said, no matter which team you root for, this is going to be a wild offseason with a lot of moving parts, and it's going to be very entertaining, very exciting, very infuriating probably for fans of some teams, again, depending on who you root for. So we're all here together, and we'll talk through it together, enjoy it together, cry through it together, whatever it may be. And we've got a lot of great stuff for you coming up here in these next weeks and months, so stay tuned, y'all. Until next time, Caps fans, stay classy, stay healthy, stay safe, take care of your fellow human beings, and as always, babes, let's go Caps!